Tell me about your stepson.
About him as a person or about
Yes,
what?
yes.
Yeah. So Sagi, um, kind of guy who lights up a room. Incredibly loving, unbelievably dedicated dad to his wife and two daughters, and his wife, of course, is pregnant with their third right now. She's due in December, and incredibly imaginative and creative. My husband always says that he's one of these people who's born with like gifts in his hands, can kind of do anything. And one of the stories I think I've told before that I just think is just really him is he's in love with old buses. He's just in love with them, and he's done these incredibly creative things, including started a business with his wife where they recognized that there were food desert communities all over the Negev where they live. He took an old bus, he made it into an incredible grocery store on wheels. They were taking it around and then eventually parked it in a community that had no store. They weren't even zoned for it. They begged them to keep it there. And
This was in
they
Israel?
were, yeah, in the Negev where they live in the Eshkol. And he was talking about creating sort of a franchise so that they would take buses, he would fix them up and renovate them into these stores and take them out into these communities that they had no access to stores and shopping that was close to them. And that was really it was just such a passion project for him.
He's a husband, a father of two with a third child on the way. How old is he?
35.
35. So take me back a couple of weeks. Um, there was obviously this attack. Where was he when he was abducted?
So Sagi and his family and my husband and my stepdaughter and her family all live on kibbutz Niroz, which is one of the kibbutzim on the border with Gaza in the ring. It's been in the news a lot. One of the incursions into the fence was directly across from Gaza, was directly across the fields from the kibbutz, which means it's about, it took them about 7 minutes to cross the fields, not even, and to invade the kibbutz. So it was 6:30 in the morning. Sagi woke up, he heard noises, he saw the terrorists beginning to come into the kibbutz. He locked his wife and kids in their safe room, and he went outside and began to do surveillance, going from roof to roof. We understand now, this is what we've learned, all over the kibbutz, reporting to the security team, which he was part of, the security team, where the terrorists were, what the movement was, where he saved a lot of lives that morning, a lot of lives. And then
He was providing intel.
he was providing intel, and then he was involved in engaging the terrorists. So the first 3 hours of that morning, roughly, we know from reports and from people who've shared with us, he was providing intel, then he was on the ground and he was battling the terrorists. And he retreated back into his house when they were coming into the house. And we do know, or we understand and believe, that he was fighting to keep them out. When they broke in, he was engaged in what we think is hand-to-hand combat with them in the house, to try to protect his family. And from that minute on, there's no sign or report of him at all.
At that point, the wife and the children, they were hiding in the house while he was engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the attackers.
That's what we believe is the case right now from reports and other information that we have.
Take me back to the moment when you got word of what happened to him.
So my husband, again, he's a university professor in Israel. He lives there full time. He's a dual citizen, as is Sagi and my other stepchildren. And he happened to be in the States with me. He was going to a conference. We were in a stopover, actually, in Baltimore, going to my best friend's son's wedding that night. And it was Saturday morning. We woke up, we got there on Friday night. to a text message from a good friend of ours here in the States who had obviously seen the news. It was early in the morning, and said, "Are you guys okay? Are the kids okay? Is everybody okay?" Um, I woke John up and said, "What's going on?" And from that minute on, of course, we were on the phone. He was calling his family. We were looking at the scrolling text of the kibbutz members as they were frantically from their safe rooms and from all over the kibbutz saying, "Do you know where so and so is? My husband's missing. I'm listening to gunshot." I mean, it was awful.
So at this point, they haven't heard from him. He's believed to be a hostage. Um,
We found that out. We found that out obviously immediately as we were connecting with all the kids on the phone, and we heard immediately that Sagi was missing.
if you had an opportunity to talk with your prime minister or our US president about what happened and what your son did, his bravery, what would you say to them?
Well, I'll begin by saying, my husband was on that call with the American families with President Biden last week, and by his reports, he was so impressed, and I've heard this from other families as well, of course, with President Biden's not just empathy but commitment, and the depth of his commitment and understanding to bringing our all the hostages back. And I think you've heard again to a family that that was very powerful for them, and they really felt the support of the U.S. president. I'll also just say that as a Floridian, a recent Floridian, I've been in touch with all of the our senators and Congress people, and they've been very supportive also and really helpful as the best they can be in making connections to the State Department and doing sort of what they can do to really get information and to support us. So the response from the American government has been tremendous as far as we're concerned. I really can't speak to the Israeli government. I'm certainly not in touch with them, and I'm not going to speak for my husband. I think that they're having the experience they're having on the ground right now. It may be different from what I'm having here and what John, of course, is experiencing also there with the American State Department and consulate. So
I wanted to ask you, because I know Israel is launching an offensive in response to what happened. Are you worried that people like your stepson would be used as human shields?
of course, I'm incredibly worried about Sagi, as I am about all of the hostages, wherever they're from, who are now being held by the terrorists in Gaza. And of course, I'm terrified. But at the same time, I am lockstep with the message that Hamas has to be eliminated. Hamas has to be eliminated. There is no ability to continue living alongside the Palestinians with Hamas in control. But I also want to be clear, and I know you're not asking me this question right now, but I want to be clear that I do not, nor does my husband, equate the Palestinian people with Hamas. There's no question that Palestinian people and the Israeli people want peace. We all want peace. That's what everyone wants. And Hamas holds everyone captive. My stepson, Palestinian people in Gaza, and they have to be eliminated. So no one wants war. And of course, I'm terrified for the hostages and for my stepson. But
Do you ever, in a million years, fathom something like this ever happening on such a scale, the way that it happened, how organized it was?
not in a million years, not in a million years. This was something that was inconceivable. I mean, I've been on the kibbutz when the rockets have been flying. It happens all the time, I'm sad to say, in that area. And okay, that's something that now has become a sad and fact of life. But this absolutely never in anyone's wildest imagination could something like
Sure.
this happen.
I'm sure that as a parent, you're very proud of your son for what he did in helping people there in Israel, in terms of providing the intel, providing, the hand-to-hand combat and the fighting back of those terrorists. I'm sure you still have to be proud of what he did.
I'm always proud of him. My stepkids are beautiful people with beautiful families and incredible hearts, like my husband. And I would imagine nothing less from Sagi, who is brave and loving and so committed to his community and to his family, to his country there.
Just one last question. What do you want our viewers and listeners and readers to know about this just horrible situation? Because here in the States, we don't encounter things like this. And I know in Israel, there's been they've had that tension, and there's that issue with terror attacks and things of that nature. What do you want our viewers, our listeners, and people who read our website to know about what's happening over there?
Wow, that's a great question. I guess first, I'd like people to know, to understand, when we're talking about these communities that were invaded by terrorists, where so many people were murdered, tortured, abducted, are missing, that these are communities, these kibbutzim and these towns on the border, these are just neighborhoods. Like, I want you to imagine, I lived in Park Slope, Brooklyn, which is a neighborhood with brownstones and schools and people for most of my adult life. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about just a neighborhood where you send your kids to school every day and you go to work, and people are living together a little more communally than we even do. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking not
But the
about.
only difference, we don't see neighborhoods invaded.
That's right. We're not talking about soldiers or army bases. I know horribly there were many soldiers killed and bases invaded. We're just talking about a neighborhood. So imagining that you wake up at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday morning to hear terrorists coming into your streets. They're throwing your doors open with M16s and they're murdering your neighbors in bed, and they're dragging your grandmother out of her house. And that's something I really want American viewers to understand, that scenario, what that scene was like. And I guess the other thing I just want people to know and understand is that point I was making about this differentiation between the Palestinian people wanting peace just like the Israeli people do, wanting to live in peace and send their kids to school and have a life that they don't really have in Gaza right now, because of Hamas's control. And that's what this horrible, horrible war is about right now, which is getting rid of Hamas so there can be some hope for peace and Palestinian self-determination and Israeli self-determination. And that's what we're doing right now. So I guess that's my message.
Well, Ms. Kate, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I really appreciate this so much.
You're welcome.